Welcome back, guys. This is our last session of the Stand series. And today we're talking about anxiety and depression and fear. And again, just to kind of remind you, this whole series was designed to pick you up off of the floor as a puddle of shocked mess and give you all these tools so that you can stand up again, thus the Stand name. And if you are interested in continuing with us and going forward and walking, which is our intention, so meaning we got you to where you can stand up, and now we want to give you those tools to keep moving forward and to keep to know what to do next, how to talk to your family, how to get to know yourself again, how to love yourself and actually really enjoy who you are, how to handle life, make decisions about your relationship. All of that is what we're going to go through, and so you can actually move forward in your life. So this is the end of our Stand series, where we feel like we've given you a lot of tools, a lot of work that you can keep going through. Again, just because we're at the end of this series doesn't mean that you're at the end of your work. So don't expect that from yourself, but you are at the end of us giving you all of these tools, and you still can have access to our group on Facebook and continue to work and process through some of that stuff with us. So I'd like to share a little bit about my story and my dealings with the anxiety and depression, and for me, fear. So for me, I never really experienced anxiety really before. Anxiety, panic attacks, that's not something that was a normal thing that I expected or knew what the heck was happening. I did personally struggle with postpartum depression after my first daughter was born. And so I got to understand that and understand how debilitating and terrible and awful that was. And so I recognized that was what was going on for me whenever I just found out. And I will tell you that in my darkest moments, I would open the medicine cabinet and I would look at all the medications and I would think, if I took all of them, I might go to sleep and never wake up. Or I'd be driving by myself in the car and I would just think, if I drove really fast into that tree, it might be over. And I never acted on it, and I've never had those thoughts any other time. But that's where I was. That's how dark and how hard that was. And so for me, what happened is those times didn't stay, because I had children to take care of. So I didn't stay in that place for very long, but others may. And for me, fear is what fed into my anxiety, and fear is what really got me. And I thought that was interesting because I don't think that I'm a fearful person. Like, I like extreme sports. I've been skydiving so many times, and I like to climb mountains, and like anything that's like dangerous, I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Like general fear, I'm like, okay, that's cool. And that's how I am, like, even with my family. I'm like, oh, it might be dangerous. You're okay, go ahead. And so fear and worrying, that's not my thing. And so what happened for me is that nighttime, I don't know why, but when the sun set, I was terrified because I did end up becoming a single mom, and I stayed in the same house. It was a safe neighborhood. I knew my neighbors. And for whatever reason, when the sun set, I was so afraid. I went crazy. I got lighting systems set up everywhere. The woods by my house was like Christmas light up, like it's daytime outside. All around my house was lit up. I got ADT to come in, cost a fortune. I had security systems of like those little sensors on every single window and every door. They're like, we just do the doors normally. I'm like, no, do the windows. And so I was just terrified. And I wasn't just scared for our safety, which was a thing. You know, how many freaking noises are there at night? I never knew it was so noisy. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was afraid for that. But like at night, I would just lay there with my thoughts. And I would be like, is this divorce going to make my children be on the pole? I mean, that sounds funny, but like, it's true. Like, am I messing everybody up? Will I ever find somebody that like loves me? I have all this baggage, kids, stretch marks. Like, I am not like this perfect 20-year-old girl. And so I was just constantly filled with all these questions, fears, doubts, anxiety, and just being afraid, period. And so that would just feed into like my anxiety attacks and the triggers. I mean, everything just piled up. And so what we want to talk about today is, you know, for everybody, it's going to be different. This is a hard topic to talk to everybody. It's like this big group that we can't hear your story and interact, right? So I'm going to have Julia talk to us about, you know, what is, so that we can understand what's going on. What is anxiety and what is depression? And that way, you know, when you can understand something, it sort of helps, takes that mystery away and helps to, I don't know, sometimes for me, when I understand something, it makes it less scary. So Julia, make it less scary.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, anxiety is your brain's way of trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you alive. And so when there is real danger, if you are being, you know, you come across a bear in the forest, you're going to feel anxious. And your body is going to go into fight, flight, or freeze mode because it's trying to keep you alive. And your brain is going to assess, do I fight this bear? If I don't have a good chance of winning, then am I gonna run away? Do I have a good chance of outrunning it? Or do I need to or am I just gonna freeze here and just hope that it doesn't notice me and just kind of go away on its own? So in different threatening situations, our brain is trying to protect us, but where it becomes unhelpful, so it's there for a reason. Anxiety, like any emotion, is not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. And it's there for a reason. But it can become harmful and it can become unhelpful if kind of left unchecked. And so understanding that that's your brain's way of trying to keep you alive, but what your brain doesn't know is the difference between a real threat and an imagined threat. So when we're going through life, we imagine all of these terrible things happening. We imagine all of this dangerous stuff coming into being. We imagine all of these uncomfortable, just really scary things. And our brain doesn't know that it's just an imagined situation. It's just a thought. It's just our brain trying to kind of make sense of stuff. And so our brain will react in the same way that it would if there was a real threat. And so that's why we go into panic. That's why we go into anxiety. That's why we go into these physical responses. So anxiety is a physical response to a worrisome thought. And what anxiety also is our attempt to get control. And like we talked about vulnerability, when things are out of our control and when they are uncertain, we don't like it because it leaves us open and it leaves us exposed and it leaves us it makes us feel threatened, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how things are going to turn out. We don't know if we're going to be okay. We don't know if we're going to make it through. We don't know that it is going to be okay. People can tell us all they want. They say it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You know, you're going to come out stronger. And you're like, how do you know? Because you don't know. Because it isn't guaranteed. And so our brain starts to freak out and to pull out all of those things. Like, you don't know if you're going to be okay. Because we don't have that full control and we don't have that full certainty. And so our brain is going into threat mode. We actually feel threatened because we don't know what's going to happen. And so if you can understand that your brain is it's clinging to some kind of control or some kind of certainty and just knowing, and that fear of not knowing is what's creating the anxiety. And to be able to kind of just acknowledge okay, this is my brain trying to protect me. This is my brain trying to make sense of everything. This is my brain trying to kind of find some solid ground right now by having some control or some certainty. And because it doesn't know if it can, it's making me feel anxious. And so that's what anxiety is just an attempt to get control when we have an imagined threat, when we have thoughts that something is dangerous. So then what depression is, and anxiety and depression are oftentimes two sides of the same coin. I sometimes say, a little bit tongue in cheek, that depression comes when we're just exhausted from feeling so anxious. And so anxiety is about trying to get control so that we can feel safe and secure and hopeful. And depression is being exhausted from hustling so hard to get that control and certainty that our brain just gives up and goes into hopelessness and helplessness. So depression is about feeling like there isn't anything, there is no certainty. I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I don't know if I'm going to make this through this, or maybe even I don't think I'm going to. I don't think I can handle this. I don't think I can do this. My outlook is bleak. My belief in myself is almost non-existent. So I feel hopeless, I feel helpless, I feel like it's not going to get better and there's nothing I can do to make it better. And so if we can kind of understand that that's what's going on in our mind, that's what's going on with us when we're experiencing anxiety and when we're experiencing depression, and that often they go hand in hand. Not everybody who feels anxiety also struggles with depression and vice versa, but oftentimes we go kind of back and forth between the two because they are so interrelated in our experience, in our minds.
So, Mello, some of us may already have a good understanding of this, but some might not. And so I don't want to assume anything. So if you walk us through how to recognize in ourselves if we are struggling with depression, not like having obviously we're all having a bad day. This is a terrible thing we're going through, but like how to really recognize if like this is a bigger picture kind of thing, how to know if you are dealing with anxiety or depression on I don't know. I'm the only one that's not a licensed therapist here, so I'm like, what do you say? But has it gone like to the point where you might need to reach out for other help kind of situation?
Right. And I think to understand that there's a difference between clinical depression and situational depression. So oftentimes when we're propelled into a scenario like we're in, where you're facing loss and grief and trying to cope with that, and like Julia mentioned, the different coping mechanisms that we have, where with anxiety we get a physical reaction, that's the coping mechanism, and with situational depression you may have a coping mechanism where you have symptoms that I'm going to talk about in a second that you've never had before. Now, clinical depression means prior to this incident, you or maybe a loved one, your relative, your immediate family, your parents, you have a history of depressive episodes, or you've been clinically diagnosed by a psychiatrist, psychologist that says to you, you've been diagnosed with this disorder or this condition. You've taken antidepressants. That doesn't necessarily diagnose you. Like, again, if you've been seen by a psychiatrist or psychologist and they said you are clinically depressed or you have whatever disorder or mental health issue and you've been diagnosed, that means that you're clinically depressed. That doesn't mean that you can't function fully through the rest of your life, but that means that we just need to treat you a little bit differently than we would treat somebody with situational depression. So I'm going to talk about situational depression first. So if you've had loss or increase in appetite, if you've had, you're all of a sudden very lethargic or you feel very hesitant to do anything, you feel a lot of fear, or if you're suffering, you're sleeping a lot more than you normally do, or you're sleeping a lot less than you normally do. Those are quick ways to kind of see that something isn't as it was. Now, keep in mind, a situational depression can be talked about with your medical doctor. And I don't think that there's ever a wrong time to share with your medical doctor what you're feeling. You really need to seek out your medical doctor to talk to him or her about what you are feeling. So you're documenting it. And again, you're creating a baseline. So even if they take your weight, your blood pressure, the physical kind of documentation that they need to take, and then they'll help you and they'll monitor you. Antidepressants, that can help you treat your situational depression. And I know there's very mixed opinion about an antidepressant, but again, I think that's a conversation that you have to have with your medical doctor. I don't think that there's ever a right or a wrong way to report or to communicate with your medical doctor what symptoms you're having, because I think it's important that the doctor gets as much information as possible to give you a successful outcome to be able to treat the situational depression that you're having. Now, there may be silent symptoms, and what I mean by that is that you may have loss of interest in anything. You may be indifferent. You may shut down where you don't want to talk to anyone, isolation. You may not be able to fully function. So like anything is overly difficult for you, like to get up in the morning, to shower, to do any of that. Now, I want you to understand there's nothing wrong with feeling this way. It's that if you stay in it versus trying to seek help and support to help you through this time. So that's situational depression in a very quick summary. And if Melissa doesn't mind, I'm going to kind of give you a worksheet, and then you kind of will see the symptoms of situational depression and clinical depression. When I was young, I was 15 years old, I was diagnosed as clinically depressed, went many, many years. And then when I faced losing my parents and my daughter and my guy having an affair all at one time, I then went back to my doctor and said, hey, when I was 15, I was diagnosed with this, and, can you help me? And my doctor was very willing and able to help me get through that time in my life. Or if you've just had a baby, you may have postpartum depression. And so that may be something that you need to, again, communicate with your OB/GYN, and you're talking to your OB/GYN, hey, this is what happened. I don't really want to talk about it, but this is what happened. And I'm having these very obvious or not so obvious symptoms. But that sheet that I have Melissa give out to you guys, that will help you kind of get a gauge. And listen, if you're having any type of thoughts of hopelessness, of not wanting to get up, you need to communicate it to your medical doctor. So that is something that I really want to encourage you, where you say, hey, I just didn't want to get up today. Let your medical doctor know. And this is where I really want to encourage you. Sometimes we feel like we're on different teams. They're on that team, I'm on this team. Your medical doctor and any medical professional is for you. They are on your team. It's not their team, it's not your team, it's your team. So there is no right or wrong in communicating the way that you're feeling to your medical doctor. I cannot stress that to you enough. It's all the difference in the world, where it may be a hormonal imbalance. It may be that you just need some medication to help you through, to level out all that serotonin, all that cortisol that's basically creating these feelings. And cortisol and serotonin, I'll also have the definitions for you. So again, I'm spewing out a lot of information, but I want you to look up the definition of cortisol. I want you to look up the definition of serotonin. And what those two have is that they create additional stressors in our bodies sometimes when we're facing trauma or betrayal. And you, my friend, are facing trauma and betrayal. So I want you to acknowledge that. I want you to know that you need to make your medical doctor the captain of your team right now, because a medical doctor is going to be able to send you out for a referral. They're going to be able to prescribe you something. They're going to be able to suggest additional ways to help you through that situational depression. And if it's clinical depression, you also need to report that, and they will take it from there, and they're going to help you through it to manage that. In regards to postpartum, same thing. Postpartum is a little bit more urgent, because that definitely has to do with hormonal imbalance, and we need to get those hormones back intact. Okay? That's depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. This is a hard one for me, because I personally am somebody that suffers from anxiety and panic attacks. And I used to not know what it was or what was causing it. There's a lot of physical symptom to anxiety and panic attacks. Most people think it's like very obvious and you're like, you're hyperventilating and it's an obvious thing. For me, I would become very sweaty. I would kind of go into a brain fog and my body would start to ache and hurt. My heart would start palpitating really fast. And I soon then, after probably 17 visits to the emergency room in 1 year, realized that I was suffering from anxiety and panic attacks. Now, I am a licensed therapist, so that is something that was very confusing for me because I was like, why didn't I realize it in myself? And again, a lot of times we think that when we are reacting physically and or emotionally, that there's something wrong with us. And I want you to understand there is nothing wrong. This is absolutely part of this process that you would have a physical and or emotional reaction to this scenario. So I want to reassure you that there is nothing wrong. It's just understanding what right treatment and what we need to do to treat it and recognize it. I think that recognizing it is the most important thing. And like the depression, I'm also going to give you another list of what are the symptoms of anxiety and panic attacks, because that's a very wide spectrum. And again, there's a lot of ways to manage it through different types of therapies. But again, start at the baseline of sharing with your medical doctor. If you, again, are feeling shortness of breath, you're feeling, again, anxious, sick to your stomach, almost like you're nauseated. If you're having night terrors, like, again, I think in another session last week, we mentioned nightmares. Melissa mentioned nightmares. When you're having excessive nightmares and you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're sweaty and you're cold, but it's warm inside your house, or vice versa, your temperature changes, those are all symptoms of possible anxiety and panic attacks. And again, there's nothing wrong with communicating this to your medical doctor. 1 out of 5 people suffer from anxiety and panic attacks on a normal day. Sister, brother, this is not a normal day. So I want to reassure you that you definitely need to communicate with your medical doctor. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I want to encourage you and again, reassure you there's nothing wrong with you. It's just, again, finding what can help you through it and recognizing, knowing that you're a little bit off. So Melissa, I know that it's kind of like, well, what if it's really wrong? If you're having suicidal thoughts, you definitely need to call 911 or go into the emergency room. And you will be so amazed by the medical professionals that are so kind and compassionate to the fact that you're struggling with something, and you communicate to them whether you've had these suicidal thoughts for the last 2 months or this is the first time you're ever having them. You always need to reach out and talk to someone for support and just let them know, I'm not normally like this. I need something to help me through this. But again, there is no right or wrong. There is just, again, communicating to individuals that are trained and licensed to prescribe you medicine, to guide you to the best resource tools that you need to help you through this time. And so no matter what, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not crazy. You're not wrong. It's okay. The only thing that's not okay is if you don't ask for help, because if somebody doesn't know and they would just see you, they probably just think you're just normal. This is just the way you are today. So again, always feel like you can communicate for help. If you don't feel like you can communicate for help, then that's when you really need to seek out your medical doctor and say, I've been having these thoughts and but I think if you're here, my friend, if you're here, then I think that you're self-aware enough to know that you need to ask for help. So hope that helps, Melissa.
Yes, it definitely does. I think that one thing I'd like to jump into is, not everybody is going to feel like, obviously we're all in like trauma and grief and heartache, and you're going to feel not yourself. Not everybody is going to feel like they need to go to the doctor. I probably should have at one point, but I think that window for me was small. And of course, we don't know your story. We don't know where you're at. So I guess, Julia, if you would talk about some of the ways, if you recognize that you are dealing with maybe not like a diagnosed anxiety or a diagnosed depression, but you're struggling because this is very hard. What are some ways that we can practically use to cope with this when we're in the moment and we're having a panic attack? We talked about that kind of like a lot of this is going to start to blend together now because we've talked about triggers and flashbacks, and that's often the same thing. But, if we're in this, like, what are some things we can do, just to cope with that and to help ourselves in those moments?
I just wanted to touch briefly too on the suicide thing, that there is a difference between a suicidal fantasy and a suicidal plan. So it's very normal when we are in excruciating pain for our brain to have like suicidal fantasies. And it's not actually because we want to die, it's because we want the pain to stop. And it's actually, so I'm going to be very careful with this, but it's actually a functional thing in our brain that brings us some relief when we realize that as out of control as my situation is, that I could stop this pain if I needed to. And so that creates a little bit of a space in our brain so we feel less hopeless and helpless. Now, that is different. So having and like Melissa was saying, some of these like suicidal fantasies of like, oh, I could take these pills right now and make this pain stop. Not I could take these pills right now and cease to exist, or I could drive into that tree and cease to exist, but I could make that pain stop. And so that is different. So a suicidal thought is different than a suicidal plan. And that's where that line is. When you notice yourself starting to create, like actually think about it, not just have these moments of like, I could make this pain stop, but start to think about and start to come up with a plan and start to go through like these step-by-steps and like following that fantasy through. That's when it's like alarm bells. This is not normal. I need to talk to someone. Right? Like if like Melissa said, one thing that grounded her and brought her back to kind of reality was I have babies to take care of. And so if you are like, realize like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to stop this fantasy right here because I've got things, like I have things to live for. I have hope. I have stuff. And so that brought her back down. But if you notice yourself thinking like, I have babies to take care of and, oh, well, they would be better off without me. Or, they would be better with someone else that wasn't this like crazy emotional mess right now, that's a warning sign. So when we start justifying, when we start coming up, like it starts to sound like a reasonable solution to the problem, and we're thinking about that, that's when the alarm bells should be going off. That's when we need to be talking to a doctor and be like, this is not normal thinking. This is my brain like trying to just like, my brain is not being normal right now. My brain is not being rational right now. And so just really recognizing that and taking it seriously, like taking that stuff seriously, because that is serious. And I think sometimes we'll tell ourselves like, oh, I don't want to like bug anyone. I don't want to like make a big deal out of anything, but if it's a big deal, what rabbit holes you're going down. And when it's time to like stop with the, I don't want to bother anyone, and be like, this is serious. I need to do something about this. And so again, when it comes to anxiety, like answering your question, Melissa, and talking about anxiety and panic attacks and what can we do with that. So here's what's physically happening oftentimes when we're in anxiety. Our brain is telling us there's a threat, right? We're having an imagined threat. Something bad is going to happen. Something's not going to be okay. I won't be able to cope with this. I won't be able to handle this. This is so awful. This feels so bad. And our brain goes into panic. And then it sends a message to our body, there is danger. Even if it's just an imagined danger. But our brain and body, but remember we said our brain doesn't know the difference. And so our body will go into a fear response. It'll go into an anxiety response. And it'll start preparing us to fight, flight, or freeze. And so everything constricts, all the blood goes to our core, our heart starts pounding, our breathing comes up to our chest because our body's just trying to kind of preserve itself in the face of this threat, which then when we're having this physical response, then it sends a message back to our brain. See, we are in danger. Look at what's happening to my body, like happening to us physically. This isn't conscious. This isn't going on. You're not actually having this conversation, but this is going on behind the scenes. And then our brain is like, oh yeah, real threat. And then it goes back to our body and we get more physically worked up. So it's just bouncing back and forth and just creating more and more anxiety, more and more stress, more and more fear, more and more panic, until we just like, it just all comes to a head. And that's where, it'll come into an anxiety attack if it just keeps ramping up and up and up. So what do we do? First line of defense, first thing to do is to intervene on this cycle. And as cliche and obnoxious and stupid as it sounds, and you're probably going to want to punch me for saying this, but this is why, is you have to breathe. And it's not just like take a breath. I'm not going to go placate you or like patronize you and say, you just need to take a breath. What I'm saying is like, you actually have to take a breath, because that is going to intervene on that physical level and show your body that there isn't an actual threat. It's going to get some oxygen into your lungs, some oxygen into your blood. It's going to get some oxygen into your brain. It's going to create a little bit of a space. And it's going to help your body to recognize, okay, we are not in actual threat right now. My thoughts, I'm having thoughts that are causing me to feel anxious, but I'm not in actual danger. Remember, in this moment, I am okay. I'm not in actual danger in this moment. And so we intervene on the physical level. Now, that doesn't make it all go away. It's not like, snap, the solution to anxiety is just to breathe and you'll be good and no problem and just go skipping off into the sunset. But we are going to break that cycle, and we are going to get you the ground underneath your feet again so that you can feel the ground underneath your feet. So you're going to take a few breaths, and then you're going to go into just acknowledging, like we talked about. I call it the name, claim, and tame. So first of all, what we actually call it the ground, the breathe, name, tame, claim. So we breathe, and then we name what it is that we're feeling. So I am feeling scared. I am feeling vulnerable. I am feeling sad. I am feeling hurt. I am feeling uncertain. So I'm going to name my feelings. How often do we name our feelings? Oftentimes we're just like having all these feelings, and maybe we have like, that research shows that most people have about 5 words that they can use to describe their feelings. But an emotionally intelligent person, or someone who is able to kind of like manage themselves, has developed a feeling sort of dictionary of up to 30 words. So getting really clear on what is it that I'm actually feeling right now. Am I feeling mad, or am I feeling scared? Am I feeling angry, or am I feeling hurt? What is it that I'm feeling? And I'm going to just I'm going to name that feeling. Again, it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. And then I'm going to claim it. And that's where we just come and we say, this is what I'm feeling. So this is what I'm feeling. So I say what I'm feeling, but then I claim it. I allow myself to have that feeling and to use some of that self-compassion. It's understandable that I'm feeling this way. It's understandable that I'm feeling scared, because I don't know what's going to happen to my kids. It's understandable that I'm feeling vulnerable, because I feel like the rug and everything that I knew has just been pulled out right from under me. So I'm gonna breathe, I'm gonna name it, I'm gonna claim it. And once I've given myself that space to be a human being who's going through something hard and having feelings about it, surprise, like shock of all shocks, then I can move into taming it. Then I can move into like accessing more of my rational, logical brain and say, okay, here's how I'm going to handle this. Here's how I'm going to do this. Here's how I'm going to work through this. Here's what's the actual truth of this, what's going on, not what my brain is kind of like spinning out of control. But oftentimes what we do is we try to tell ourselves when they're in that moment of anxiety, like we try to tell ourselves like, this isn't logical. What's good, like, just like stop thinking this way, or just let it go, or just think positive, or, like just get over it. And why are you doing this? And we try to manage an emotional brain with logic. And we are not logical beings who can sometimes be emotional. We are emotional beings who can sometimes be logical. And so if we're trying to, we're trying to fight fire with oil by trying to force ourselves to think something different when we're in the thick of it. So we have to intervene on that physical level to do the breathing. And then we have to use that mindfulness and that self-compassion to just acknowledge what it is that we're feeling, instead of trying to force it out or talk ourselves out of it or judge ourselves for thinking or feeling it. And then once we have that space and we've given ourselves permission to be imperfect beings, funny how, then we can go in and we have a better chance of accessing our logical thoughts and our rational mind and being able to say, okay, what's really going on here? What do I need to do about it? How do I need to think about this different? What steps do I need to take? How do I want to manage this? So for any kind of intense emotional experience that we're having, that's the process. Breathe, name, claim, tame.
Melo, do you have anything to add to this?
I think a huge exercise that, again, I give to anyone when they're facing situational anxiety and panic attacks is that, and this has been life-changing, these things, is I take a cup of crushed ice and I chew it. And that physical process, and I wait till the whole cup is chewed. And I know, but like by then your mouth is like numb and you're like, forget it, I'm not going to have anxiety anymore because I've chewed up all this ice. Just kidding, guys. Wanted to see if you're paying attention. But seriously, the act of being able to chew on the ice and slowly chew it, and again, going back to mindfulness, when you're focusing on chewing the ice, it will start to soothe you. And that breathing is so utterly necessary. Is you're again retraining your mind and resetting your mind to focus in on breathing, chewing the ice, breathing, chewing the ice. And so by the time the cup is gone, it doesn't have to be a huge cup, but a smaller cup, and you chew the ice and you again have caught your breath. And that exercise, it has been pivotal for me and a lot of my clients and work that I've done for anxiety, because again, when it's situational and you're in the scenario, a lot of times when you find something out or you're triggered or you're in the moment of just, again, you're claiming the fact that it's really happened. I'm not even getting into acceptance, but you're just claiming it, you're recognizing it. It can be where it'll shock you and it'll send you into anxiety or panic. Anxiety and panic do both happen sometimes, where the panic attacks are from the anxiety that you're feeling. So when you chew the cup of ice, it will definitely guide you to center and to calm yourself. And again, start you breathing, really intentional breathing. So I hope that'll help.
I love that. Yeah, like just going to piggyback on that, like that physical experience. That's so huge. To have this almost like we're shocking ourselves out of this, the intensity of the emotion, and like figuring out how to do that, like how to move through the intensity. Sometimes, some people find it really helpful to go for a run. Like I personally have my best runs when I am the most pissed off, because I'm like running that energy out and I'm just not sitting in this battle, in this like emotional chaos. And I'm moving through, we're moving through that energy so that we can find the ground under our feet again. So whatever we need to do to find the ground under our feet again, to kind of bring us back down, having some kind of physical experience is really powerful for that. I love that ice thing. I'm going to try that.
So I'm just sitting here thinking, holy crap, here we are, guys. Like, we've done this tremendous amount of work. We've been together for 8 weeks. And we really hope that you have gotten a lot of good insight. We really wanted to have, different people, different perspectives involved in this so that you could get, a lot of different takes on it, people's experience and their studying and research throughout their years. So thank you, Julia, and thank you, Melo, for being a part of this. This has been really good, really amazing. I mean, it's hard to say good because we're in such a terrible place, but man, when you get this information and these tools and you actually apply it, it is good. The situation sucks, but what we're going to become and what we're going to do on the other side of that is amazing. So thank you so much, ladies, for being a part of this. And again, I know I've already said this, but our goal for this was to get you to stand up, and our next goal is to get you to walk. And I think that's so pivotal. So If you haven't signed up for that right now, push pause. Go ahead, push pause. And sign up for that, because we need you. We don't want to leave you like in this place of hanging, but we also didn't want to overwhelm you, like I've said. And so going along with us in these next steps are so important. I remember that when I started to learn who I was again, and again, I married like my college boyfriend. So I was never, ever single, ever. And then all of a sudden I was. And so I literally had to figure out who I was again. And it was interesting because so many people who I talked to, they're in that same place. And that was really, really cool to do, but really hard. And I just kind of meandered my way through it. So we're going to do a lot of that work, dealing with our family, learning who we are, learning how to really care for us in more specific ways, care for ourselves, like not just dealing with the trauma and the anxiety, but like how to care for ourselves in normal life too. So we definitely want you to partner with us and keep going with that. So we hope that you do that. And again, I know that we all feel the same way, Milo and Julia and I. We are very proud of you. The fact that you showed up, the fact that you're here at the end of this session just proves to us, and you should hopefully be proving to yourself, that you will never be defined by this. This will change you, but you are going to be so much stronger than you ever knew, and you're proving it to yourself all the time. So keep fighting, keep working, refer back to your notes, keep reaching out to your support group, and you will see how much work you've done and how proud you are. So thanks, guys. I'll unmute you two, Julia and Milo. You guys have been great. Thank you again.
It has been such an honor to be a part of you who are watching this, to be part of your process. Thank you for letting us into your heart and your heads and your lives, and letting us be part of your journey. Thank you for trusting us. I mean, I guess that's the biggest thing, is we didn't, you didn't ask to have us here guiding you, but hopefully throughout this process that we have honored your space, and that we have earned some trust in your life. Yeah, especially in this time when trust feels like a hard thing to give. So thank you for showing up for you, not showing up for us. Good for you for showing up for you and deciding that you deserve better and more.
Well, I just want to honor you and say to you that I am so proud of you on this journey. And I know that facing impossible can feel like you're never going to make it through. But in this moment, you are doing it. You are choosing you. You are deciding that you deserve an extraordinary life living after the affair. And whatever that means for you, just remember that you are worth always, always honoring yourself, just like I do, just like Julia does, and just like Melissa does. So you're in my heart, and my grace and my love is with you always.
All right, guys, thank you so much again. And hopefully we'll be seeing you next week as we dig in and start walking forward. Bye.